Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the talk of Tory plots as various journalists explain how Sunak's opponents, both inside and outside the parliamentary party, aim to bring him down before the election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So earlier this week, Liz Truss loyalist Simon Clarke penned an article calling for Rishi Sunak to resign, referring to polling evidence of ridiculous stupidity even for the Telegraph. The reaction from within Tory ranks was instant and widespread. Almost every one of Clarke's colleagues either told him to sit down and shut up or observed diplomatic silence. Even Liz Truss, Clarke's mentor, said that it was wrong to call for Sunak to be replaced at this time. Some commentators thought that Clarke was doing this not to try and depose Sunak now, because that's clearly not going to happen, but to get ready to blame him for the inevitable election loss. But that cannot be quite right. It can't be quite the right reason for someone like Simon Clarke, because Clarke is going to lose his seat at the next election. He's not in like a really safe seat where he's just positioning to take over the party afterwards. Frankly, if Sunak were able to get the poll gap down to something respectable, Clarke would still be losing his seat. He's simply not going to be taking part in the post-election leadership contest, which means that it's more likely, in my view, that he genuinely believes that replacing Sunak is the only way to save his seat, and that he does not want to be, or that he wants to be part of the group to bring that about. He doesn't want to be on the outside after the election. Indeed, it may well be that Clarke is so convinced that it is possible to save his seat with the right leader and policies that he's willing to risk being seen as the bad guy within his own party. After all, if he's so desperate to remain in Parliament, what has he got to lose? Then it was revealed that Sunak's former pollster was working with a shadowy group of Tory donors to undermine Sunak and force the Tories to bring him down. Oddly, and this was doing my head in a bit yesterday, much of the Tory client media were reporting that this pollster had just quit. But I think that was to amplify the embarrassment for Sunak, because as I said in my video yesterday, he quit last year, he quit months ago. It's just that he's been outed as working for this group that are trying to bring Sunak down this week. So now we've got the Times and Sky, at least, both talking about this plot against Sunak and what it involves. It's actually been quite funny, because every time I've seen a tweet of one of them talking about this plot, Nadine Dorries gets all excited, urging people to buy her book, which is of course called The Plot. She's seemingly oblivious to the fact that they're talking about the plot which she's part of, not the one she made up for her book. So what is this plot, the real plot? Well, the Times and Sky have been reporting it's an attempt to undermine Sunak's credibility whenever there is any bad news for the Tories and amplify it in the media. The way Sam Coates for Sky described it, it involves essentially expecting the poll results to stay as they are and making a fuss about everything, including the local election results in May, in order to sort of drip dissatisfaction with Sunak, in order to make it seem worth the risk of replacing him. So according to these reports, this plot seems to breeze past May without a general election, because their plan continues beyond May. But if journalists like Coates and Swinford can work this plot out, so can Sunak and the Tory whips. It just makes a May election surely even more likely because of the fear of being able to hang on until November. Consider that as soon as Sunak calls the election, his MPs have no option but to swing behind him or be seen as wrecking their chances. So the sooner he calls the election, the sooner all but the most hardened rebels stop causing trouble. And although this could just be journalists drawing spurious conclusions based on this week's events, there is some credibility that Sunak genuinely fears such a plot. Yesterday, there was a quite bizarre moment in the House of Commons. Penny Mordaunt, the one with the sword, not as good as my sword, obviously, but a sword. She gave a really bizarre statement about Rishi Sunak, saying, oh, he's a good father and he gives quietly to charity and all that. And you think to yourself, well, why on earth was a member of the cabinet giving Rishi Sunak a character reference in Parliament? What's that about? And as for quietly giving to charity, I can't think of a noisier way of giving to charity than to have it announced in Parliament to be reported on by the national news outlets. And as a little aside, when it does come to Sunak's charity work, he famously donated a cheap bottle of wine to a local school in his constituency and $3 million to a school in America. No wonder he's quiet about his charity. But why was she making this statement? It must have been a reaction to something. It wasn't in answer to a question asked. I didn't see the debate myself, but I read in Hansard the build up to it. And, you know, Labour's Lucy Powell was certainly basically saying that Sunak's useless. But she didn't ask if Sunak was a good father or gave to charity quietly or otherwise. So this was clearly a statement intended to send out a message beyond the walls of the House of Commons. A sign that Sunak feels that he needs to defend himself from something. But what is it that Sunak fears? I'm not sure he fears being deposed. The fact that Clark was so mercilessly isolated this week, including from prominent MPs on the far right, his close colleagues, suggests that what we suspected for a while. The vast majority of Tory MPs know that replacing the leader again would make things worse, not better. There's no appetite for it. It's possible that Sunak merely fears that this plot is just going to make things worse for the Tories without achieving their aims, which would be my assessment. You know, this sounds like the crappiest plot ever. It basically works on the assumption that the polling won't improve, which of course is possible, and for them to attack Sunak in the media whenever anything bad happens. So what bad news might they be anticipating? Well, next month we've got a couple. We've got 2 by-elections. In fact, 3 weeks today, I shall likely be publishing a video about how Labour have nicked another 2 Tory seats and what the breakdown of the results means for Sunak. I am unlikely to be describing it as good news for him. We will then have the verdict on whether or not we're in recession at some point next month. If we're not, well, the economy is still stagnant. If we are, well, we can probably expect both the Rebels and Labour to go to town on the news. In March, we're going to have the budget. If it can be attacked, you imagine it will be. Inevitably, no matter what's announced, it won't go far enough for some, particularly those who want Sunak removed. Then the Rwanda Bill might rear its ugly head again. Towards the end of March, the Lords may well be handing Sunak back his bill with red pen corrections all over it. That could provoke divisions again if it's not clear whether the Lords will back down if Sunak refuses to accept any revisions. Now, at this point, if Sunak is going to call the election for May the 2nd, he'll have to announce it before the end of March. So anything happening in April and beyond is largely meaningless, because once the election's called, Tory MPs will have no choice but to swing behind Sunak. Their fate will be in his hands, and rebellions will either have to cease or they will be seen as being at least partially responsible for their own downfall. But what if Sunak doesn't call the election in May? Although I keep saying that he's clearly aiming for it, there are reasons to suppose November's possible. First, Sunak seems genuinely surprised that the polls are behaving as they are. He expected a boost from the National Insurance con this month and is expecting a boost from whatever is going to be announced in the budget in early March. Now, if he doesn't get that poll boost, if the polls are still roughly as they are, I can absolutely see Sunak delaying the election until autumn just out of a sense of panic. But there was another interesting bit of news as well. Might talk more about this tomorrow. The Tories are delaying Brexit checks on fruit and veg again from the end of April until like the end of October. Now, if there were to be a May election, those checks would be Labour's problem, no matter when they take place. So why delay the checks unless you think that there is at least a possibility you're still going to be in government over summer and the last thing you want to be presiding over is fruit and veg shortages in the shops? So I do believe the Tories are leaving themselves an exit ramp for a November election. They are credibly doing that. And if they do, then this drip plot can then go beyond March. You know, it can look ahead to channel crossing numbers, which could easily go up if we have a better summer of channel crossing weather. They can poke at the emerging fault lines in Cabinet over Sunak's plan to persuade the DUP to restore power sharing by basically promising not to diverge on any laws which affect trade across the Irish Sea. But the way I see it, you know, Tory MPs have made it clear they do not think replacing Sunak will help. Even MPs who've never had faith in Sunak are saying it would be mad to replace him before the election. So all these rebels are going to do is poke at the raw wounds in the party, preventing any chance of even partial healing. And so their prediction that the polls will not improve for the Tories becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They will keep amplifying anti-Sunak news in the media, which will keep the public aware that the Tories are fighting like rats in a sack and the furthest thing from a government that you would want. So how can their poll rating possibly improve? At this point, so damaging is this for the Tories, I am beginning to wonder if the reason we don't know the identity of these mysterious Tory donors who commissioned that MRP poll is because they're not Tory donors at all. What if they're Labour donors? That would make far more sense for it to be a Labour plot than a Tory one. But no, the truth probably is that some influential and wealthy Tories really are this stupid. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.